And I'm going to try not to get super emotional and over the top on this one, but this really pisses me off. Well, hello there, endurance nerds. You're joining me here in a little bit of a different layout today as I'm in kind of webcam mode, ready to do a little screen sharing for a segment that we may as well just call Drama for Your Mama. Hello! That's right, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here doing a react video, so break out your popcorn, your pitchforks, and pick your fighter because shit's about to get real. Let's go. That's a joke. My channel has never been and will not be about drama. The intention of this video is not in any way, shape, or form here to drive outrage, division, negative engagement in the contents, to drive views and clicks. That's not what this channel is about. That's not what I'm about. Rather, this video is intended to be a thoughtful and measured response to a video that did, in fact, rub me the wrong way. I did leave a post about that the other day on my community tab. We're going to be talking about a bike radar video that they posted about a week ago now, so I've had a little time to digest and respond. But there are some things that I want to discuss, and it's through the lens of the message being sent to the greater community, the community of cyclists and the endurance community as a whole. I place a high value on nuanced context and constructive discourse, so rest assured, if you're a little bit unsure about wanting to watch React content because you've seen what happens elsewhere on social media, maybe you want to give this one a chance because you're in for a more measured and substantive conversation than that. Now, with that said, this video has the potential to be a little bit on the longer side. We will be going over a video that unto itself is 7 minutes, which will require some interspersed commentary throughout the video, as well as bookending the commentary with my kind of preamble and my closing thoughts. I have to say that because I invariably get some sort of comment about the length of the video. It's right there in the thumbnail. I will try to leave some timestamps down below, although this video is probably not one that you want to skip through chapters. You want to get the whole conversation. But if you get partway through and you need to come back to it at a later timeline, maybe those chapters will help for you. Now, I will be playing through the entirety of the video from end to end. I will be stopping it periodically to respond to the points that they made, but I think this is important to mention for a few reasons. Number one, fair use, because I will be transforming the content in such a way that I will not be playing long portions of the content that can be reproduced. This falls under fair use. Number two, I don't want to be accused of being disingenuous or deceptive editing techniques to clip up their video, react to it, maybe out of order or missing important context. I want you to see the entire context and the continuity of the video from end to end so that you understand that the points that I'm making. With that in mind, this video is not a replacement for watching the source content. You should always be looking at the source material before you engage in conversations about it. There are still methods of deceptive editing, even if it appears that I'm playing the video from end to end, so you can hold me accountable. I don't want to be taking views away from this particular channel, even though I don't really agree with the video. It's not the right thing to do, and I have more integrity than to try to draw views away from another channel by showing my discontent with their content. And lastly, there is a difference in consuming the source content when I'm interrupting and I'm making my points in between that might be placing a bias for you and your observation of the content, and then watching it uninterrupted from end to end. So I will be leaving a link to the video down below and up here. You can choose whether or not you want to pause the video right now and go check that one out first, or if you want to watch through this video and then go watch the source video uninterrupted. So with all the boring blah 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 cover your ass disclaimers out of the way, what are we talking about today? And I want to discuss a video that was on the Bike Radar channel that was posted about a week ago now. It's called Indoor Cycling is Boring and That's the Way I Like It. And the conversation about this video does require a bit of a preamble, if you will. And I want to talk about why I am looking at this video through this particular lens. And to do that, I want to lay a little bit more context. Bike Radar, as the name implies, is a cycling channel. It's been around for several years and it's closing in on 750,000 subscribers. And I think this is an important point here. Now, while in the realm of YouTube, 750,000 subscribers isn't really all that much these days, with so many channels getting up over 7 figures in terms of subscribers, in the cycling niche, in the endurance sport niche, this is a very large channel. There's only so many eyeballs on YouTube that are dedicated to this type of content. So 750,000 is right up there with the big hitters in this particular space. And why that's important will become a little bit more clear as we go on. Now, their bike-specific content has been centralized mostly around that informational or educational content, including how-tos, reviews, commentaries, and so on and so forth. Very similar to something like a GCN, but on a smaller scale. A lot of the views that these type of channels get are actually not coming from their subscribers, but rather coming from search. But people do subscribe to the content because they think there's going to be some value in the future. And a lot of people end up outgrowing channels like these for the most part. A lot of what I see on GCN and Bike Radar, from my experience in cycling, doesn't have a whole lot of utility for me anymore. However, I do stay subscribed to those channels because occasionally there's something new or novel. There's a new product that I get early access to that I'd like to check out. Maybe there's some sort of repair tutorial. I'm not saying that these channels don't have any value whatsoever, but they're not really channels that you watch every single video that they put out. Most of the videos published by Bike Radar are likely to be evergreen and drive more traffic over the course of months and years through search. Now, why is this important? Why would I go through a biography of the channel before I go into reacting to the video? And it's about perceived credibility and expertise in the space. For anybody who consumes YouTube for educational content or even entertainment content, you'd be lying to yourself if you said that you never looked at the views, the number of subscribers, or the number of likes a video and or channel have as a part of your entire model of their credibility. How much should I trust this person or this channel that I don't know with this new information? And how likely am I to fold this into my own mental model? For a large channel like Bike Radar, where a lot of their views are being driven through either search or through algorithmic suggestions to people who have never seen their content before, they need to make a judgment call. And they're going to use those particular metrics as part of that judgment. A lot of these channels benefit from a high degree of credibility from those metrics, and that may or may not be earned. I'm not saying that Bike Radar hasn't earned credibility. It's unlikely the channel would get to that size if they haven't done something right along the way. However, it doesn't mean that they're an expert in every single domain of cycling, and it doesn't mean that they can't have bad takes or just plain get it wrong. I do strongly believe in the Uncle Ben paradigm, if you will. With great power comes great responsibility. When channels have a certain amount of reach, as they continue to grow and amass more subscribers and more views, the greater amount of scrutiny and responsibility they need to take with their particular content. They need to be more measured in the content that they put out there in the ether, because that content has the potential to be misused, because your viewers may or may not have the understanding, competency, built up context, whatever might be required to interpret your video or your information appropriately. And the risk attached to that varies, right? There's news and medicine, which could actually hurt people or delay responses to things that are critical to preserving life and limb. Then there's technical content that could cause people to maybe break systems or technology. Maybe there's content about products. If you look at some of the larger channels out there, where I'll use Marques Brownlee as a prime example of this, he has to be very responsible with his content, and he wields that responsibility effectively because he knows that if he makes a review about a product or about a company, a positive review could sell at their warehouse. A negative review can send their stock plummeting. It doesn't mean he needs to censor his opinion, but he needs to be cautious to make sure that what he's putting out there is accurate, is well thought out, and is not going to be subject to misinterpretation. Some content creators do that very well, and some do not. But the reality is that a content creator or channel cannot maintain the same relationship with their subscribers at 1,000 all the way up to 1 million. Your relationship with the group of people who are going to watch your videos is going to be different. There's a substantial difference between, let's say, me telling my neighbor or my friend that I have an opinion on something, and maybe it colors their perception or their opinion or imbues them with some sort of bias about that particular subject matter, and maybe they pass it on to 1 or 2 other people. But it's unlikely that my influence on that one person is going to have sweeping effects on a community or a large group of people. Even this channel, right now this channel is under 20,000 subscribers. It's still a pretty tight-knit community of folks. Not all of you participate in the comments, and I don't get to know all of you, but there are several names and faces down in the comments that I've interacted with, and you've gotten to know me, and I've tried to get to know you the best that I can through obviously text-based conversation, but you have an entire history of context with me. You've either been along for the journey or you've gone back and you've watched some of my videos, so you've gotten to know who I am, and you've built this construct. You know which of my opinions that you align with, which ones that you may not agree with. We're okay having a conversation and agreeing to disagree in the comments down below. But if this channel all of a sudden was 1 million subscribers and driving so much traffic from people who aren't subscribed, you can no longer manage that context or that relationship. It just is what it is. It is a sad reality of content creation in 2024 as people segue from making content for fun into doing it as a job. And as I set the stage here, I can understand how this might sound over the top, or I'm catastrophizing about a bike channel. It's not that serious. It's just a video. And at the end of the day, I'm not saying that this video is that serious, but rather it's a drop in the bucket in terms of a perception that's being laid out specifically to new riders. People are searching and seeking out this content to make a buying decision or making a training decision, and that could impact their future in the sport and whether or not they decide to continue, or if they choose the wrong path in something that's not right for them as a result of the opinion being shared in the video by experts or people with credibility. That hurts the growth in the community in the long run. So at the time of making this video, the Bike Radar video has about 18,000 views. Is that a mind-blowing amount of views? No. For a week, that's not a huge amount of views for a channel that large. So the impact is somewhat limited. But I do feel like every single person who's looking to enter into cycling or to continue to grow in their cycling is critical. We're facing a crisis when it comes to a sport of cycling because it's just not available and accessible to a great number of people. The expense and the culture alone are enough to drive a ton of people away. When I first started cycling as a woman, I might have been the only person in a group or a race, certainly under 5%. I think that statistic has improved, but we're certainly not anywhere near demographic averages. Women in cycling still account for under 20% of the total population. It's a little tough to wrap your head around why that is, considering other endurance sports like triathlon, which includes cycling, running, and the like, are closer to 50-50. It probably depends on the year. In some cases, you might see more women than you see men in those sports, but for some reason, cycling lags behind. But this reason isn't that big of a mystery. It comes from an old guard of kind of a good old boys club. It was a very kind of aggressive and elitist paradigm. And women who, on average, tend to be a little bit more conflict avoidant, a little bit more agreeable in nature, are likely to stand down from environments like that. And this video isn't just about women in cycling. I'm just using this as an example as to why a video like this starts to rub me the wrong way, because I start to get a little bit of that feeling of, okay, here's this elitist kind of HTFU mentality, and that's why people, at least of my gender, are turned off. And I believe that there are a number of other people, including men, that are turned off by this as well. I want to share something here right from their main page in YouTube. So we'll go ahead and open up their description here. We'll zoom in so that you guys can read this here. And I'm going to zoom in on the bottom two paragraphs here. So it says, while we always strive to be inclusive, we need to do better and have begun work on a plan to drive meaningful change, but we know it's a work in progress. We love to hear from you and are open to suggestions as to how we can create positive change together. I think it's important that we bear that in mind as I go through this video. They put right out in their kind of ethos here that they want to drive inclusion. And that's race, color, creed, gender, bubblegum flavor, whatever that is, because they know inherently that cycling on the whole has been kind of an exclusive sport. We've edged a lot of people out by way of income, by way of race, by way of gender, and any other arbitrary factor. We've also edged people out for maybe things that are a little bit more invisible, right? Feeling like you have to be an elite level racer to roll up to a group ride. That paradigm has turned a lot of people away from the sport. However, I don't know if this is just my own bias or I've become environmentally blind to it, or if we've really seen substantive change. But my intuition is that the inception of programs like Zwift and social media have driven a larger and more inclusive community. We have a lot of work to do, just like their description says, but we have gotten better. We need to continue the momentum and move in the right direction and invite more and more people into the sport that we love. It's a net benefit for all of us. If we get more people involved with cycling, there are more events available, group rides, races, prices come down on equipment because there's a higher level of demand and they can benefit from mass manufacturing. We all win together if we can bring more people into the community. However, this video that we're going to watch in just a second here seems to me anathema to those ends. It seems like it's very judgmental to people who might not believe in the paradigm that this particular presenter believes in. And I think it would do more harm in driving people away from the sport than it drives them toward it. So I know that was a lot of groundwork to cover, but I think it's important to bear that in mind to help you guys to understand the reactions to this video. And my perception starts with this here. So if you look at their thumbnail here, please stop this is right in the thumbnail. We're in an era where we need to make provocative title names and thumbnails to drive clicks. I get this, but there is immediately a perception that somebody needs to stop something. Is it the rider? Is it the creator of the platforms that we're going to be discussing? Let's go ahead and find out.
As indoor cycling becomes more fun, I and one or two others on the Bike Radar team want it to stay boring. The popularity of Zwift's virtual world suggests we're in the minority though, and in general it's good that indoor cycling no longer means slogging away on the rollers with only a thudding techno beat to distract you. But
So no issues here with the opening of the video. They're just laying out their premise here that they believe in particular that the more boring cycling training apps might be better for them, or at least so it seems, than the more immersive platforms. And you see a video of Zwift, so you can tell that that's going to be involved with this particular video.
what's fun is not always good for fitness. In this video, I'll explain why some of us, mainly my extremely fit colleague Jack Evans and myself, hope that training-focused alternatives remain in a world of increasingly gamified, realistic indoor cycling.
Okay, so again, no real problems with what they had to say here in terms of making sure that there's a place in the market for these other platforms. We'll get into it here. Spoiler alert, they're going to be mentioning platforms like Trainer Road. And I agree with that premise wholeheartedly. I think that each of these platforms have their strengths and their weaknesses. And boring platforms usually do the training paradigms and workouts a little bit better, let's face it, much better, than the more immersive platforms. I do think it's a little bit weird that he talks about his extremely fit friend Jack when Jack doesn't make a single appearance in this entire video. So he's basically speaking for somebody else to maybe add more credibility to his opinion. It's something that reads to me as we go on in this video is a little bit of a false authority complex, but you can tell me if I'm wrong there. A little B-roll. Let's go.
The attempts of clever software designers to make indoor cycling apps more engaging and lifelike are wasted on us. And that's not for any lack of trying on our part. We've done Zwift racing, explored RGT cycling's virtual worlds, and grovelled through simulations of World Tour races on Wahoo's system.
Again, I think this is pretty fair. As a channel, Bike Radar has likely put up several reviews about these other platforms. I know they've done reviews of Zwift, so they're just adding credibility to their statement or their opinion by saying, hey, we're not just knocking it and not trying it. We've actually gone through this. And I have no problem with that whatsoever.
But when I jump on my smart trainer, I'm not looking to replicate the reality of riding on the road or trail. I'm making the choice to avoid the real-world variables that make producing the power I need to harder. I don't want to steer past other virtual cyclists or ride through poorly detailed virtual worlds. I just want to train in a structured and effective way.
Okay, so here's where we start to get the first hints of where this video might be taking a negative direction, but you're not quite sure yet. I 100% agree with the premise of when you're coming in from the outdoors and you want to train on the indoor trainer, you're looking to control certain variables, right? If you're in workout mode, it's much more easy and efficacious to be able to control things in either erg mode or resistance mode. If you've ever tried to do structured workouts on the real road, you know that there's a ton of things coming at you, whether you're fighting around traffic signals, other cars, undulations, being able to be cognizant of what's going on around you while you're trying to stare at your power. It just doesn't work very well. So yes, you come indoors to kind of omit some of those variables that happen outdoors. That's not the only reason you come indoors, as people in the Northeast absolutely understand, but it's a perfectly fair reason. But the little shot or the dig at the developers over poorly developed roads, I just don't think that that was necessary. Yes, we all know that Zwift could stand to improve by way of graphics, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's necessarily intended to be a next-gen video game. It's something that's meant to be accessible to as many riders as possible without a huge encumbrance in terms of technology. Yes, those of us with dedicated graphics cards, 4K TV setups, dedicated setups, we would love to see better graphics. But I don't want to see that come at the expense of the community either. While it's a fair criticism to say that the graphics are kind of in 2024, is it necessary to make their point here? It just sounds petty to me.
So after no shortage of experimentation, I've settled on the exceedingly Spartan Trainer Road, where gimmicks such as virtual worlds, Tron bikes, power-ups and special jerseys are cast aside.
I love Trainer Road. I've talked about Trainer Road in the past. I think it's great. I use it all the time. They've settled on Trainer Road. It leaves aside the gimmicks. Again, it seems a little bit snarky, but I could let that one pass. Yeah, they don't use any gimmicks. No fuss, no muss. That's not what they want to specialize in. They're not specializing in immersion. They're putting all of their intellectual firepower into making sure that they have the most effective training tool by way of training plans, as well as well-designed and variable workouts as humanly possible. They've done a great job with it. I've been on Trainer Road longer than most. My account dates back to, I believe, 2012, before Zwift was even a sparkle in anybody's eye, and I've been an uninterrupted customer for over 12 years. So please understand, as we go through this video, I am not disagreeing with the premise that Trainer Road is a better program when it comes to structured training.
Structured workouts and adaptive training plans are all Trainer Road does. If using Trainer Road resembles any reality, it's something akin to the grey, grainy footage from an old East German propaganda film showing young hopefuls spinning on rollers, staring at the gymnasium wall.
Like, I don't know why that's necessary. It's fine. Like, it doesn't bother me all that much. But it is another little dig to me that's kind of interpreted as that harden the fuck up. These are the strong men of cycling, badasses that could just train staring at a brick wall. How great are they? They're so much stronger. They're so much better than I am.
Because we think the platform is potentially far more effective for training than its competitors, we can abide its lack of stimulation. The ends justify the means.
Little B-roll. Quick reaction to that, like, I get it. You're willing to sacrifice the immersion for the superlative training opportunities that you get out of Trainer Road. But this is the crux of my issue with this video right here. You are creating a false dichotomy between the platforms. You are saying that it's either or, when in fact it's both and, if you want it to be. I'm not saying that doesn't come with a cost, right? Paying for 2 subscriptions instead of 1 could be deal breaking for some people, so you have to make the choice as to what's more important to you. But let's face it, people who are in cycling, on average, have a higher disposable income. And a year's subscription to multiple of these platforms, if cycling is important enough to them and their training is the foremost priority for them, it's just a drop in the bucket. It's something that they're willing to invest in. So you don't have to leave Zwift behind to be on Trainer Road or vice versa. And that's the point that continues to be doubled down on in the course of this video. So maybe I'm spoiling my entire reaction. But even my first time watching through the video, I'm starting to kind of get a weird taste in my mouth about what's to come here.
For some of us, many features designed to make apps more lifelike undermine the benefits of indoor cycling. Now, you may be better disciplined than us, but when we ride up behind another cyclist on the open road or tackle a climb, the urge to increase our effort is always there. When base training, surges above zone 2 of your training zones are really what you're trying to avoid.
So in a vacuum, I think this is a perfectly fine point, but it's not about the difference between Trainer Road and Zwift. It's about one of those things that you need to be cognizant of when you're using any of the immersive platforms, whether it's Zwift, Ruby, Full Gas, what have you. There is a competitive element to those of us who engage in endurance sport. Sometimes when we see ourselves getting passed by somebody else, we may feel the urge to speed up and catch up or pass them. I get it. It's human nature. I'm not arguing that that's the case. But if you're doing structured work, especially with any degree of intensity, that usually goes away. It's usually superseded, at least for me, but I think for a lot of people, by the deliverable on the screen. I'd rather get my checkbox, whether it's getting my stars on Zwift or making sure that I'm not failing the workout on Trainer Road. That's more important to me than the person who's riding past me, because they're just riding on a different day. But he does zoom in here on zone 2 work and making sure that you're not undermining zone 2 work by surging. An occasional surge on a long endurance ride isn't going to hurt anybody. Whether you have to climb up a hill or you chase somebody down, opening up the legs a little bit here and there is not going to undermine it. It's when you start getting into that trap of doing that for longer periods of time. Right? If you start with a zone 2 ride and then you end up with a zone 3/4 group ride, yeah, that's a problem. But that's not really what's being discussed here. You're just riding around on the roads and you're trying to do your, let's say, 2-hour endurance ride. And every once in a while, you maybe sprint to catch up or pass somebody in a small section. It's not going to undo the entire benefit of your zone 2 ride. Is it going to bake in a little bit of additional fatigue? Sure. But how often are you really chasing that carrot? If you're doing it throughout the entire ride, that's a bigger issue that you need to address from a perspective of mental training. And what this video could have pursued that could have been productive are tactics or strategies to help to mentally train yourself to not give in to those particular temptations.
So, reining in our competitiveness and avoiding undulating terrain on outdoor aerobic development rides is one option, but turning to the controlled environment of the pain cave is another. So, the presence of other riders' avatars and climbs on the likes of Zwift are exactly what we're trying to avoid while working on our cycling endurance.
So I beat him to the punch on the point there, but whether you're outside or inside, I don't think this is a Zwift versus Trainer Road issue. I think this is something that needs to be discussed more from a training perspective and a person's individual discipline. If you just cannot help yourself outside or indoors, if you really have to lock yourself down and stare at a wall in order to train effectively, I think that's a problem that needs to be addressed instead of avoided. That's just my opinion though.
You can, of course, do structured workouts on Zwift, but the banners above the avatar suggest that many more Zwifters are doing unstructured free rides, or what you could call riding around aimlessly without achieving any physiological goals, such as improving VO2 max.
We got to zoom in for this, guys, because at this point, the first time, the second time, the fourth time now watching this video, this is the point that they lost me. And I'm going to try not to get super emotional and over the top on this one, but this really pisses me off. And let me break down why. Number one, I think it's a disingenuous claim to say that based on the banners over the heads of the riders on Zwift, that's an indication that most of the people on Zwift aren't doing structured workouts. The truth is that you don't know. We don't know what that percentage is. We don't know if it's 90-10. We don't know if it's 50-50. And here's why. Not everybody who does structured workouts on Zwift does the workout mode within Zwift. There are many ways to do structured workouts. I never do structured workouts on Zwift unless it's for the academy or some particular challenge or deliverable. Otherwise, my structured workouts are happening on Trainer Road overlaid on Zwift. So I'm doing structured work. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean I'm not doing it. People who do structured workouts based on either their head unit or their own mental model, if they're going to do 20-minute efforts around threshold, they don't necessarily need workout mode to tell them to do that. They're just out there in free riding. Now, do I think that most of the people on Zwift are doing structured training? No, I don't think the demographics break out that way, but we shouldn't be making a value judgment based on who's doing what. But I think that the people who are looking to train to compete or be competitive, whether it's in group rides or things that are not necessarily formalized, that might be following a plan, they're using workout mode or some sort of structured workout in one way or another. It's not for Bike Radar to judge whether or not they're doing that. They're missing the point of what Zwift really is. Now, to be charitable, a point that they could be making is that Zwift is not necessarily a platform that's tailor-made to people who are interested in structured training. I would say that that's directionally correct. And that first half of that statement is mildly annoying, and you could argue that it'd be super pedantic to just zoom in on that alone, but it's the second half that really drives me nuts. Talking about it being riding around aimlessly with no benefit, like enhancing your VO2 max. Why are you policing how people train? Even if you look to the pros, they are not doing structured training 5, 6, 7 days a week. They are only doing structured training certain days out of the week, and then interspersing could be complete free rides. It could be minor structure in terms of rides that don't require a workout mode. Who the hell are you, Bike Radar, to judge people that are riding around on Zwift as riding around aimlessly if they're not in workout mode? I just think that that point is snarky, judgmental, and just intellectually lazy. If you are a new rider watching this video, and you have a channel with the credibility that we talked about, with the large number of subscribers and a reasonable number of views, talking about how riding around on Zwift is riding around aimlessly. And this really isn't subject to interpretation. They're saying this explicitly. What do you, new rider, think? It could be, I'm doing it wrong. There are people in this world, whether it's in their entire life or in particular domains, that just do not have a strong sense of self-identity. They don't feel comfortable in their own opinions. They would rather look to the leadership or the opinions of others to guide the decisions that they make. And videos like this are going to prey on people like that. I don't know what percentage of the greater population is reflected by that statement, but in my own life, the people that I have interacted with, I have to say it's close to half. People who just don't want to make a decision, that don't want to hold an opinion, they're afraid to be embarrassed. I'm at a point in my life, and I don't know if it's just because of my temperament, my age, my experience, a combination therein. While I care about what other people think, it's only a very small fraction of how I operate in the real world. Listening to this from a person who may have been cycling longer than I have, may be faster than I am, is not going to shift my paradigm because I do have strong convictions, albeit weakly held, so that I can update my knowledge base with new information and new assumptions. This type of opinion and value judgment is not going to change my mind. If I rewound 10, 12, 15 years when I was younger and earlier to the sport, would this type of content or this type of statement have a greater bearing on the decisions that I made? I can't tell you that. I'd like to think no, but it's very possible that I might be trying to elevate my status and the perceptions people have of me as a cyclist and say, okay, well, if I really want to take my cycling seriously, I can't be doing it on Zwift because those people are just aimless.
Whereas on programs like Trainer Road, we can tap away at the prescribed power output, turning our heartbeat up with only the drip of our own sweat and suitably energetic playlist. Without the temptation to chase after other avatars, Jack and I don't spend too long in the dreaded physiological grey zone of Zone 3.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut off the 3 there. I wanted to point out the fact that I thought it was interesting that this is now the second time that he's called Jack into the conversation. Where's Jack? Why don't we hear from Jack? Like, this is just a point of style, I guess, when it comes to the video. But if you're going to use somebody's name and use them as what is being perceived as an authority on the matter and somebody who's strong and fit, Jack can speak for himself. He's a host on the channel. Why isn't Jack there giving his opinion or speaking for himself? So I didn't distract from the point that he was just making. They were talking about remaining in the dreaded Zone 3, and I have something to say about that here after they make their point.
This moderate intensity level is fatiguing relative to its fitness benefits. So excessive tempo riding is a common cause of indoor training burnouts and possibly overtraining. Would you be interested in a video about training principles, zones and the like? Let us know in the comments.
I don't really know if I want their particular video on training zones and the like, but I do want to make a point about that Zone 3. It's directionally correct. Right? They talk about dreaded Zone 3. I think people misinterpret it sometimes to the extent that they should never ride in Zone 3. I don't think that that's what they're saying here, so I'm not trying to misinterpret their point. But I think instead of baking it into this video this way, this is something that's more about training in particular and has nothing to do with what platform you use. Zone 3 is a perfectly fine zone. you will build up your aerobic engine very effectively with zone 3. The higher zone 3, more in that sweet spot approaching threshold, the greater the benefit. But what they're trying to say here is that if you're in like low to mid tempo zone and you're spending a lot of time there, you are getting marginally more benefit than you would riding in zone 2. However, it's not proportionate to the amount of fatigue that you're going to bake in. You're better off taking a slight sacrifice on your aerobic development riding in zone 2 and not baking in that fatigue that takes longer to recover from, which means you are less capable of putting in additional physiological load during the course of the week, coming back fresh for your structured workouts. So it's a fair point to make. I just don't think it fits here. What you need, a little more B-roll. Music.
In Jenny Graham's account of her record-breaking round-the-world ride, Coffee First, Then the World, she describes it taking on the air highway. Nicknamed the 90-mile straight for good reason, the road runs for 145.6 kilometres in a straight line between Western and Southern Australia across the treeless Nullarbor Plain. Now, that sounds pretty dull, doesn't it? Well,
so I'm just going to pause right here. I think this is a little bit weird to bake in here. Again, this Jenny, why don't you just get an interview blurb with her? Let her speak for herself. They probably read this article and are opining on the article. I'm not saying that's out of bounds, but it's just kind of a weird force fit into this video to, again, add more authority to what they're saying.
In preparation, Graham rode on a turbo trainer with a map of the Nullarbor hanging in front of her to visualise ticking off the kilometres. She G'd herself up for the mind-numbing crossing by telling herself nothing will ever be as monotonous as riding a stationary bike while staring at a brick wall. Now, this is an extreme example, but those of us not planning to circumnavigate the globe by a bike in 124 days can still learn from it.
So she used staring at the brick wall as a method of mentally training herself to deal with very boring or monotonous riding. I think that there's more than one way to skin a cat when it comes to this. And their point is well taken that it's rather extreme for a lot of people, but they're still using it as a selling point. So let's see what they say when they try to segue this into their particular point.
Any sustained effort on the bike can become boring. The mind can wander during time trials and audaxes alike. But to develop a mental strategy, nothing beats doing the real thing. And we find relatively monotonous indoor cycling good preparation for the duller moments of a long ride.
Fair enough, right? Mental training is a part of training. We know that especially when you're doing solo efforts, so time trials, people who are in triathlon, which is basically an extended time trial, or just long rides on your own, they can get boring. And if you don't acclimate to it, it could cause you to become distracted, your higher RPE, all fair statements to make. And this could be a video unto itself, right? How to mentally train for quote unquote boring riding. But again, it seems like a force fit here. So we'll let him continue his point.
In this scenario, the time-honoured tactic of dividing the daunting remaining distance or time into chunks can make it more manageable. Jack and I use the same strategy to break down the prolonged block of endurance riding on our smart trainers. Now, we enjoy solo riding. If you don't though, unsociable indoor cycling apps more closely replicate the loneliness of the long-distance cyclist and can help you acclimatise.
So I think this is a bad point. I just do. I ride solo 99% of the time. I can ride with groups. I've ridden in races before. I've ridden with friends before as a function of just being a busy professional and just training when I can. I ride most of my rides by myself. And I can tell you from my own experience, now maybe I'm an outlier. I don't think that that's the case, that I ride on Zwift and it's not like I have this massive sticker shock going outside and I can't ride outside by myself because I ride too much indoors. Perhaps a super user of the social elements of Zwift could fall into that trap. If you're always in group rides and you're always chatting and then you go try to ride on your own, I could see that as being a potential. But I don't think that that's the intended audience for this particular video. We're talking about people who want to train to improve as a rider or segue into strict training. I think that that kind of goes without saying that if you're going to be strict training, sometimes you just need to put your head down. You don't have to get off Zwift in order to simulate boring solo riding.
At the more explosive end of the sport, hill climb racing demands intense concentration to remain steady power when the lungs and legs are stinging. My extremely fit colleague Jack knows a lot more about this than I do.
Started drinking game
He says his minimalist approach to indoor cycling has helped him hone this focus and tune into how hard an effort feels. In training, looking out for hazards and taking in surroundings on the road distracts you from your effort.
This just gets weird for me. It's going to continue to get weirder. We're trying to parlay hill climbing now into a training platform in which one is better. They're going to cite the fact that distractions on the side of the road may detract from your focus on your efforts. That's part and parcel of riding outdoors. You need to be cognizant of the riders around you and the distractions and things on the side of the road. You cannot stay hyperfixated on your power meter. Even if you're on a closed road scenario, it's just inadvisable to do something like that. To say that riding indoors where you can be singularly focused on your heart rate and your power execution would prepare you for that on a hill climb, I just don't think that to be accurate. Now, they did talk about acclimating to how it feels at different power deliverables. I'm going to let them continue their point here, and I'll kind of talk about that here too. They're just jumping back and forth in terms of simulation benefits and trying to mirror outdoors versus not mirror outdoors. I'm trying to react to like the multiple points and maybe the non-point that they're making here.
This is true to a lesser extent in a virtual cycling world, where all extra stimulus can be distracting. This is good when you want to pass time quicker, but it's less advantageous if you should be paying attention to your power, heart rate, and rate of perceived exertion. For Jack and myself especially, doing high-intensity interval workouts on a paired back indoor training platform has improved our pacing.
So I don't know if that's an unfair point, right? If you really just want to zone in and be myopically focused, and for you, Ashley and Jack, if your ability to focus on something like Trainer Road has allowed you to be more diligent with your pacing, that's perfectly fair, right? That's personal preference. I'm not disagreeing with that. It's the recruiting. It's the selling it to others as the superlative method, and that you can't focus on your pacing if you don't use a paired back platform. But I think in this particular case, they did express it as their own personal opinion, which I don't feel has been the case for the entirety of this video.
We think we have a better idea of what, say, 450 watts feels like, because don't forget, in the oxygen-starved tunnel vision of a hill climb, you can't always read your power meter. Well, Jack knows what that kind of power feels like. I make do with far less.
So from just a factual basis, I don't think I entirely agree with this. And this is not because I have a bad taste in my mouth from the preceding kind of judgment or value hierarchy being created. Just as a standalone point, you have a better idea of what 450 watts feels like. First of all, that's probably a little bit of a humble brag, but be that as it may, I don't know if that's entirely true. Now, sustained efforts at whatever your target wattage is for longer periods of time on the indoor trainer, you will definitely have an enhanced understanding of where your general perceived exertion is, how your breathing is, and what your heart rate is like. However, all of that goes out the window when you are in a competitive environment. I have yet to meet somebody who doesn't have some sort of physiological response when it comes to racing or competitive environments versus their training. There are so many other variables that play in. Nutrition is usually enhanced when people are racing. They're taking in a lot of exogenous fuels and sugars to make sure that those glycogen stores and their glucose availability is at the apex level for their competitive advantage. Looking at the competition around you, you have natural adrenaline. You are trying to win. There's excitement, right? So your heart rate's going to be up. Maybe because of that, your perceived exertion might even be lower. So you don't necessarily know what 450 watts feels like, or your RPE could be higher because you have some sort of anxiety. So to think that you're going to have parity between how you feel on the indoor trainer at 450 watts versus how you feel in a more competitive environment, I don't think that that's a fair comparison to make. Even how it feels underneath your legs, how your muscles feel contracting. There's such a disparity between the low inertia feel of riding a bike and the weight of the bike up a hill and what it's like to be on an indoor trainer. Whether you're in erg mode, you're in a resistance mode, even if you're simulating some of the hills on Zwift, depending on what your trainer difficulty or slope is set at, you usually have higher inertia at the flywheel of your trainer than you would have on the real road. And that is just a difference in torque that you're applying, and that's going to feel different. Yes, it can help you to prepare to an extent, but I wouldn't hang your hat on this as a primary focus or advantage of being on an indoor trainer, specifically to a program like Trainer Road.
If you want to check out some of our hill climb videos though, click on the playlist above.
We can see Jack
Getting
again.
layered up for cycling in the winter takes longer, and there's a mental barrier to heading out in the cold, wet and dark. I'm sure many of you have had that too. Jumping on
the end of this video kind of gets a little bit weirder too. Like there's some mixed comparisons, if you will, here, right? we're talking about outside riding versus indoor riding, and then we're talking about trainer road versus Zwift. I'm perceiving that as a faulty corollary, calling Zwift ultimately the same as outdoor riding. So by using it, you are completely eliminating the advantage that you'd have from outdoor riding. This point about dressing for winter riding, he's going to get into his primary point here, so I'll let him continue. But I did want to touch on the kind of bouncing back and forth and trying to mix the message a bit.
Turbo trainer can require a lot less motivation as long as your setup is simple. It can be a palaver to connect an electronic shop's worth of devices to a smart trainer. All you really need for indoor training is a phone and a heart rate monitor, while the trainer can take care of the power if you have one. It's not worth projecting trainer roads interval blocks onto a laptop or TV screen, and we don't need a keyboard, headset, or handlebar mounted controller to speak to strangers sweating in solidarity in different time zones.
So this is another part of the video that I think it's an intellectually lazy argument here. You're talking about the simplicity of a setup, and I've talked about this myself. I don't think this has anything to do with trainer road versus Zwift. I think this is just about the simplicity of your setup. And to be fair, the title of the video is Indoor Training is Boring, and not specifically about Zwift. They just put a lot of Zwift B-roll in here, and they talk a lot about some of the features that Zwift has. So I keep kind of zooming in on that point. But you need to scale your training environment to what makes sense to you. And if your setup is not simple, but it's low friction, the motivation is the same, if not better, right? I have a full setup that has trainer desk, 2 fans. I've got Zwift on a PC with a keyboard. I do have the Zwift Play controllers that I use from time to time. I have a riser block. I don't have a kick or climb or anything like that, but I have a riser block that I can use to kind of change the position of the bike a little bit. But for me to get on the bike, I can be on the bike and pedaling within 5 minutes. All I have to do is find a clean pair of bibs, throw on my heart rate monitor, put on my shoes, and I'm ready to roll. So just because I don't have a pared back simple setup doesn't mean it can be friction free, and it doesn't mean that it's going to impede my motivation. Now, if you have to drag everything out of a closet every single day and set it up in your living room or a limited space or in a garage, then yeah, you have to pare some of that back. But again, not specific to Zwift in particular. You don't need all of those things to ride on Zwift. As they said, all you need is a heart rate monitor. You don't even really need that, but your power of sorts, whether it's coming from the trainer or your power meter, and a phone. You can do that on Zwift, albeit less immersive. You can do it on your phone. And then they make it a point with the picture that's on the screen, which is super apropos, that they don't need a full keyboard to sweat in solidarity, yet they use the picture of the community workout feature that Trainer Road has, which of course you do need some sort of controller and your webcam on your laptop, which you're picturing here, to use. It's just creating another false dichotomy. Not all of these things are required for Zwift in particular. Even if you're zooming out to talk about structured training in general, this is more about preference. I don't see how in any way, shape, or form this is going to impact the effectiveness of your workout. They're making a faulty premise that because your system is more complicated, that you'll be less motivated to train. I would argue that a person who invests in an immersive environment may find that more motivating. But again, it depends on the person.
We also don't need to mess around with a riser block, steering, or rocking devices to mimic real riding. We can just...
So I'm going to pause right there. The eye roll, the air quotes, to mimic real riding. Yes, some of these peripherals can be gimmicky, but there's also a point to some of them as well. Like a riser block, or even the kick or climb to an extent. I've used a riser block for years because if you move the front end of your bike up a little bit, it will impact muscular recruitment patterns. So using more of your hamstrings when the front end of your bike is a little bit higher. I didn't buy anything super expensive to do that. I used very cheap $20 Cyclops risers that were stackable, and I can lift up the bike into any angle I want. Is that a marginal gain? Sure. But why not? I have that available at my leisure to help use different muscles. The rocker plate, that's the most vilified peripheral I have seen in the space of training. And I think it's because they're so expensive, at least the ones that are well designed. The rocker plate is not about trying to have fun on the indoor trainer. The benefit of the rocker plate is to ensure that you are able to execute the highest level of power possible for longer periods of time. The body does not sit on basically a fence post when you're riding in the real world. You have bike sway that's taking the pressure off of those sit bones and your undercarriage. If you are just constantly sitting in a fixed position, your body will break down regardless of how experienced you are. Some people are better at that than others. Even a little bit of motion underneath your saddle can help out quite a bit. Are rocker plates required these days with trainers looking like they're going to start integrating this right into their base? Probably not necessarily worth the space and the investment, but it's not like it's just a gimmick for fun. You're missing the point entirely.
We can just go outside for that.
We can just go outside for that. Can you? When you live in an area that it's unsafe to ride outdoors for anywhere between 4 to 6 months out of the year, can you just go outside for that? There are plenty of areas in the world where it is not feasible to ride outdoors for long periods of the year. My area, because of the snow, the cold, the lack of daylight, the wet, the grit and grime on the roads, the fact that cars aren't expecting you, because it's not even about grit or tenacity, it's about what crazy person who's trying to get themselves killed is out on the road. And this is from anywhere from 4 to 6 months, other than the occasional window of a day or two here and there. You're not riding outdoors because you can't. Down south in the US, there are areas that get so hot during the course of the year that it's unsafe to go outdoors for physical activity lest you get heat stroke. The United States is not the only country in the world that's subject to those variable weather patterns. Maybe in the UK, there's not those protracted periods of time where you really can't ride outdoors. But in a video to me, to this point, that seemed more like a kind of a recruitment video than just sharing an innocent opinion, you're not taking in all the variables and you're speaking for your own personal experience that is not reflective of elsewhere in the world.
Don't get me wrong. Some turbo training accessories, such as a trainer table, are practically useful.
Well, how mighty white of you to give me the permission to use my trainer table and a fan. I'll make those concessions. Don't get me wrong. It's okay to use a trainer table. Those are practical. But the rest, we don't need them.
But it's fair to say a lot of them probably reduce the convenience of indoor cycling rather than add to it.
Could it be inconvenient to have extra peripherals? Sure. I don't know very many people, I don't know everybody, but I don't know very many people who are setting up and tearing down these ultra complicated systems every single time they ride their bike. They're finding a balance that works for them, that helps to ensure that they stay motivated to get on the bike when they see fit and not have this exceptional encumbrance to doing so.
Do we really need the added complexity of gamifying indoor cycling? Jack and I don't think so, and
I think this is the 6th or 7th time we're talking about Jack. We've seen pictures of Jack, videos of Jack, but we haven't heard of Jack. Why are we talking about Jack at all? If this is Ashley's opinion, let Ashley speak. If Jack wants to talk about his opinion, Jack should speak.
I think many of you will agree. The possibility to do sustained, uninterrupted efforts can be lost as fun features become unwanted distractions.
We couldn't see it, but you know he did air quotes for fun features.
We know our opinion isn't universally popular though. Our colleague Simon von Bromley disagrees and wonders how many of us would really choose boredom over fun. Well, we would.
So the rest of this video, I think, is just closing. I'm going to play through it anyway, so you know I'm not leaving anything out. But there's people within Bike Radar that disagree, and I'm glad that they didn't necessarily promulgate this as the Bike Radar opinion. The tenor and the tone that's being used throughout this video, so what you said is how you said it, it just seemed a little bit judgmental and snarky towards alternatives. Air quotes, eye rolls, editing. It reads as elitism to me. And the definition of elitism is the belief that something or someone is better than others, and often for arbitrary reasons. I think that this is one of them. But let's let the rest of this play through and we'll give some closing thoughts.
Boring indoor training makes us fitter, faster, and cycling in the real world a lot more fun in the long run. That's what we think anyway. And now I want you to let us know what you think. Make yourself heard in the comments. And if, for some reason, you want to make your indoor sessions more fun, and fair enough, check out this video.
So that's it. I'm not going to say the video was 100% abhorrent from end to end, that there weren't any redeeming qualities whatsoever, but I do think that it was lazy. The examples they used and the comparisons that they made were lazy. This had the potential to be a great video to talk about some of the best ways to balance indoor training protocols, some of the trappings of the immersive platform, how you get the most out of your training. You can absolutely share your opinion. This isn't about censoring somebody's opinion and saying that it's not correct. Again, from a training perspective, I don't fundamentally disagree that Trainer Road is the better platform, but it's not an all or nothing. But they spent the entire video making it sound like it is. The video seems to spend a good amount of time creating kind of a false value hierarchy between the platforms or types of platforms. It's not something like a almost self-deprecating opinions like, yeah, I'm one of those guys that's kind of weird. We like to stare at a brick wall and train. I get so distracted by Zwift, so I found this to be better for me. That's not how this is framed. It's framed as, hey, me and my buddy Jack, we're super strong and fast and experienced, and we think this is better. So let me sell you on why. Again, you have the right to say whatever you want, share your opinion. And I'm not saying that recruiting people is off limits to your way of thinking, but it's the way that the point is made, disingenuous or altogether inaccurate takes or comparisons, almost taking advantage of a viewership that's probably more novice in the realm of cycling, and you could be steering them in the wrong direction. If there's anything I've learned in the last 15 years of cycling, over which period I have done copious hours of research at a time when this information was not immediately available on social media, it's that there is no one size fits all for anything. There's no one type of bike that works for everybody. There's no training protocol, whether it's pyramidal or polarized, that fits for everybody. There's no nutrition plan that fits for everybody. Any coach, any content creator, any thought leader in the space that is trying to sell you on one paradigm to rule them all is lying to you and is just looking to separate you from your money. Anybody who knows anything about human physiology and biology and brain chemistry knows that we all have different genetic predispositions to respond to different stimulus in different ways. Some people respond really well to high volume, low intensity, and they get really strong really fast in doing that. Other people do better with lower overall volume, but baking in a lot of intensity. There are certain elements of training, a lot of them that I've shared here on this channel, that really do impact a larger portion of the bell curve where a lot of these different paradigms and strategies overlap. But we can't say declaratively that one particular modality, whatever it might be in, is going to be effective for everybody or even a majority of people. It's just being fundamentally dishonest. This video, in my opinion, should have been sold to a particular subset of their audience that might be similar to them. Hey, if you guys struggle with distractions, struggle with knowing which workout you should do next. Maybe you don't necessarily have the discipline to not respond to other riders on the road or stray from your prescribed program because there's too many races or group rides available to you. You may want to take a look at something like Trainer Road. Sell it that way. Have people understand the benefits and how it might be something good for them to experiment with. Or better yet, you can talk about how these protocols or these platforms can be used in concert with one another to provide a broader benefit for the riders. Instead, it feels to me like they're selling this idea that if you want to be one of the strong men of cycling, you need to harden the fuck up, be willing to stare at a brick wall while you're training, and be bored because that's going to make riding outside more fun. I'm sorry, that is a generalization that you just cannot make. I think the sentiment that was in my head after watching this video, even the first couple of times, the first day that it came out, was who is this video for? Why would they make this video? And I'm not the only person who thought that. I did see a couple of comments early on that were similar in sentiment. And to answer that, there might be a couple conclusions one can draw. Some of those conclusions I have seen in those comments to that very video. One of those conclusions was maybe they feel blown off or shunned by Zwift and they have a bone to pick. I don't think that that's necessarily the case because Zwift just wasn't called out explicitly enough. Granted, it was pictured enough. It didn't feel like an all-out dunking on the platform, but it is possible. The next conclusion I saw people draw was that this was paid for by Trainer Road. I really don't think that this is the case. First of all, any channel worth its salt, especially with that many subscribers, if they fail to disclose a paid partnership, they could lose their channel and they can lose their income stream. I don't think that that's the case for that reason alone, but also I've been following the Trainer Road community for most of the 12 years that I've been on the platform, via their forums, via their podcast. They have brought up Zwift before, but it has never been in an adversarial way. They don't even talk about Zwift as a direct competitor because Zwift really isn't a direct competitor, but they rather talk about how they can coexist in this space. And even to the extent that they were at one point discussing an API or some sort of partner linkage that people can use if they are a subscriber to both and some synergies that could be created. Regrettably, nothing ever came of that, but that is the sentiment that Trainer Road has towards Zwift, and I highly doubt that that has changed. And lastly, and this is the conclusion that I'm choosing to draw, is that a channel like Bike Radar is somewhat of a content farm, right? Their income is driven by how much content they can produce. They know that this is a niche area, and in order to drive more views, sometimes you just have to put out more content. This is a 7.5-minute video that covers a more nuanced and complicated subject, ranging from physiology all the way to psychology. I don't think that they did the subject matter justice in doing this, but we are in a society right now with very short attention spans that is focused very much on either short form content or simple listicles, get to the point and just lob up the answers for me so I don't have to think critically about it. I think that's a bad approach to be taking here, and for a large channel like Bike Radar to sort of reinforce that is a little bit disappointing to me. The more cynical view I would take in terms of the content is that they know that this particular video in this space of cycling is going to be divisive. It is going to drive some outrage. It is going to drive some potentially negative interactions in the comments. But in the eyes of YouTube, interactions or engagement is good, even if it's bad. Even if people are angry with you, if they are watching through the video and they are responding in the comments and they're responding to one another's, that is giving YouTube a signal that they should drive more traffic to this video. And that's how some videos end up with virality. I don't think this particular subject matter will ever go viral, but that is a strategy that is employed by larger content creators because, again, their livelihood depends on it. And I don't envy anybody who has made YouTube their full-time gig. It seems appealing to be your own boss and to work for yourself and to share your opinions and your passions for a living. Once you realize that you have to keep a roof over your head at the behest of advertiser dollars, sponsorships, affiliate links, and the like, especially in a very volatile environment where advertisers are being a lot more parsimonious with what they're spending their money on and the ever-changing landscape and shifting goalposts, you have to continue to kind of hustle for your worthiness on this platform. And sometimes you stop making the content that you're passionate about and you really believe in, and you make content for content's sake. I'm not doing this to dog on Bike Radar. I respect what they do. I know that they add value to the community. I just think that they got this one wrong. I just think this one sets kind of a negative message to the community and puts factions against one another versus trying to create an environment that, per their own introduction on their homepage, working towards something more inclusive. I know that they'll never do it, but I'd love nothing more than to see Bike Radar take this video down and remake a more thoughtful, longer form video that can really benefit the community. And on the off chance that they do take this video down, I'm more than happy to take my video response down because I truly believe that there is a place for people to learn from their mistakes or their missteps and to learn and move forward. I don't think that they're going to ever see this video or give a damn what I think, but I just wanted to put that out there. At the end of the day, I'm motivated to bring more people into this community and to help people as I can and in my own way to navigate what can be a very complicated and confusing landscape. That's what all of my videos have aimed to do. Of course, I've shared my opinion and I've shared my thoughts, and they're not necessarily opinions that people agree with, but I do hope that my videos and my channel has been an overall force for good and has helped more people than it's harmed in this space, and I want to continue to do this, and I'd like to see Bike Radar do better in the future. But let me know what you think. Again, not talking about the Trainer Road versus Zwift debate, but whether or not you think that the way that Bike Radar presented this particular opinion or point was good for the community. And maybe I'm just completely off my rocker and I've completely misinterpreted everything that they've said. My intuition tells me that I'm not, but I'm more than willing to be proven wrong. So let me know what you think. Hit all the YouTube-y stuff, like button, engagement, no fighting in the comments. Be nice. Subscribe, bell, thingy, YouTube stuff. All right, guys, have a great night. See ya.